What if I told you there's a way to trick your brain into success? No willpower, no discipline, no struggle. What if the difference between staying stuck and making progress wasn't motivation, talent, or even hard work, but just 20 seconds? That's all it takes. Think about it. You know exactly what you should be doing, working out, writing that book, building your business, but something always stops you. It's not laziness. It's not that you don't want it badly enough. It's your brain's hidden autopilot, steering you away from effort without you even realizing it. But here's the secret. You don't need to fight your brain. You need to hack it. And the best part, it takes less time than brushing your teeth. A Harvard study found that people who made one tiny change in their environment were 3 times more likely to stick to a habit, not because they were more motivated, but because they removed the invisible speed bumps slowing them down. That's the power of the 20-second rule, a strategy used by Olympic athletes, Silicon Valley CEOs, and self-made millionaires to make success effortless. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to rewire your daily routines so that doing the right thing becomes automatic and self-sabotage becomes almost impossible. Let's dive in. The human brain is designed to resist effort, not because you're weak, but because evolution shaped it that way. For thousands of generations, conserving energy meant survival, while unnecessary exertion could mean danger. That ancient wiring still controls more of your behavior than you realize, explaining why you can passionately want to change, yet still struggle to follow through. Every decision you face is actually a silent battle between 2 competing systems. In your mind, one is the thoughtful, planning part that cares about your future and sets ambitious goals. The other is the instinctive, impulsive part that seeks comfort and immediate rewards. The impulsive system is faster, stronger, and always looking for shortcuts, which is why you might find yourself procrastinating even when you know better. Conventional wisdom says success comes from willpower, but science tells a different story. Willpower behaves like a limited resource that drains throughout the day, leaving you vulnerable to poor decisions by evening. Studies show people who rely solely on discipline fail at habit change far more often than those who strategically modify their environment. The brain naturally gravitates toward the easiest available option about 95% of the time. This is where the 20-second principle makes all the difference. Research reveals that making a desired behavior just 20 seconds easier to start triples the likelihood of sticking with it long term. Similarly, adding just 20 seconds of extra steps to an unwanted habit makes people significantly less likely to do it. That small window represents the critical threshold where your brain decides whether something is worth the effort. Consider how this plays out in daily life. Someone who wants to exercise in the morning might lay out their workout clothes the night before, reducing the friction of getting started. Another person trying to eat healthier could keep snacks in an inconvenient location, creating just enough delay to reconsider impulsive choices. These tiny adjustments work because they account for how the brain actually operates, rather than how we wish it would. Highly effective people across various fields understand this intuitively. They build systems that make productive behaviors nearly effortless to begin and unproductive ones slightly more difficult. They don't depend on motivation because they've structured their environment to support their goals automatically. Their success comes not from superhuman discipline, but from recognizing and working with the brain's natural tendencies. The key insight is that your surroundings constantly influence your decisions in ways you might not notice. When struggling with habits, the solution isn't to berate yourself for lacking willpower, but to examine and modify the hidden triggers in your environment. Small, strategic changes to reduce friction for good habits and increase it for bad ones can create dramatic improvements over time. This approach transforms behavior change from an exhausting test of willpower into a matter of intelligent design. By understanding how your brain makes decisions, you can create conditions where the right choices feel natural and the wrong ones require conscious effort. The difference between action and inaction often comes down to those critical 20 seconds that determine which path your brain will choose. The most fascinating part? This 20-second principle applies to every area of life where behavior change matters. Want to write more? Keep your notebook open on your desk with a pen ready. Trying to save money? Move your savings app to your home screen while burying shopping apps in folders. The pattern holds true. When you make the right action slightly more convenient and the wrong action slightly less convenient, your behavior follows automatically. This isn't about manipulating yourself through complex systems. It's about recognizing that your environment constantly sends subtle signals to your brain, shaping your decisions before you're even consciously aware of making them. The chair positioned perfectly for watching TV, the phone charging next to your bed, the sugary snacks placed at eye level in the pantry. These aren't neutral arrangements. They're carefully designed, though often unintentionally, to trigger specific behaviors. What few people realize is that you can flip this script. Instead of your environment working against you, you can set it up to work for you. The person who effortlessly maintains good habits isn't necessarily more disciplined. They've simply arranged their surroundings so that positive choices require less activation energy. They've made healthy options the path of least resistance. The implications are profound. Imagine waking up to a bedroom where exercise is the easiest possible option. Picture a workspace where focused work flows naturally, while distractions require extra steps. Envision a kitchen where nutritious food is most accessible, while treats take effort to obtain. This isn't fantasy, it's the practical application of behavioral science that anyone can implement starting today. What makes the 20-second rule so powerful is its simplicity. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Just identify one habit you want to change. Then adjust your environment to make the desired behavior 20 seconds easier to start, or the undesired behavior 20 seconds harder to begin. The cumulative effect of these small tweaks can completely transform your daily patterns over time. Consider how this might apply to digital habits. Simply moving social media apps off your home screen and into a folder adds that crucial 20-second delay that allows your rational brain to catch up with your impulses. Changing your phone's display to grayscale mode makes scrolling less stimulating. These tiny friction points create just enough space for better decisions to emerge. The same principle works in reverse for productive habits. Setting up your work materials the night before eliminates morning decision fatigue. Keeping a water bottle at your desk makes hydration automatic. Programming your coffee maker on a timer ensures you wake up to freshly brewed motivation. When you reduce the startup cost of good behaviors, they stop feeling like chores and start feeling like natural parts of your routine. This approach reveals an important truth about human nature. We consistently underestimate how much our environment shapes our choices. We blame ourselves for lack of willpower when we should be examining the setup of our physical and digital spaces. The good news, while you can't instantly rewire your brain, you can immediately redesign your surroundings to support rather than sabotage your goals. The most successful implementations of this principle go beyond single habits to create entire ecosystems of positive reinforcement. When multiple 20-second tweaks work together, they create a kind of behavioral momentum, where doing the right thing becomes progressively easier, while slipping into old patterns requires conscious effort. This is how lasting change takes root, not through heroic bursts of willpower, but through intelligent environmental design that makes better choices inevitable. Our brains are wired to seek efficiency, constantly calculating the energy required for every action before we're even consciously aware of making a choice. This subconscious cost-benefit analysis explains why we often default to familiar patterns, even when we consciously want to change. The moment between intention and action, those critical 20 seconds, holds the key to reshaping behaviors without relying on willpower alone. Neuroscience reveals that action initiation triggers a cascade of neural activity that makes continuation more likely. This explains why simply putting on workout clothes increases exercise completion rates dramatically, or why opening a document makes writing flow more naturally. The brain's reward system activates differently once a behavior has started, creating what researchers call behavioral momentum. This principle applies universally, from fitness habits to creative work to financial decisions. Our physical and digital environments constantly send subtle signals that influence these micro-decisions. The placement of items in our space, the default settings on our devices, even the lighting in our rooms, all create invisible friction or ease around certain behaviors. Someone who struggles with late-night screen time might find that simply Charging their phone across the room creates enough delay to break the automatic reach for distraction. Similarly, preparing a morning workspace the night before can make productive starts nearly effortless. The most effective behavior change systems work by aligning our surroundings with our intentions, rather than fighting against our natural tendencies. We can design environments where better choices require less activation energy. This approach acknowledges that willpower is finite, but strategic design is reliable. When healthy options are the most convenient and distractions require extra steps, our default behaviors naturally shift toward our goals. Digital spaces demand particular attention in this design process. The average person encounters hundreds of potential distractions daily through their devices. Small adjustments like turning off non-essential notifications, using grayscale mode to reduce visual appeal, or implementing app timers can create just enough friction to allow conscious choice rather than automatic engagement. These tweaks don't eliminate options, but they do create that crucial pause where intention can override impulse. Financial behaviors follow similar patterns. Automatic transfers to savings accounts remove the decision point entirely, while making discretionary spending slightly more deliberate can significantly reduce impulse purchases. The person who carries only a set amount of cash or implements a 24-hour waiting period for non-essential buys is applying the same principle to their financial life that an athlete applies to their training regimen. The cumulative effect of these small environmental adjustments creates what might be called a success ecosystem, where positive behaviors flow naturally while negative ones require deliberate effort. Over time, these designed environments reshape our neural pathways, making productive actions feel increasingly automatic. This explains why people who maintain consistent exercise habits for years often report that skipping workouts eventually feels more uncomfortable than doing them. Perhaps most importantly, this approach removes the self-judgment from behavior change. When we understand how deeply our environments influence our choices, we can stop blaming our character for struggles and start strategically redesigning our surroundings. The difference between action and inaction often comes down to those few seconds of friction or ease that stand between intention and execution. By mastering this principle, we can create conditions where success becomes the path of least resistance. The secret to effortless success lies not in fighting your natural tendencies, but in understanding and working with them. Your brain is constantly looking for shortcuts, and when you align your environment with this reality, remarkable things happen. Small strategic changes to your surroundings create invisible guardrails that gently guide you toward better decisions without requiring constant willpower or motivation. Consider how professional kitchens are designed. Every tool has its place. Every movement is optimized for efficiency. This same principle applies to personal productivity. When you arrange your workspace so that important tasks flow naturally while distractions require extra steps, you're essentially creating a cognitive kitchen where your mental energy is channeled effectively. The writer who keeps their research materials organized and within reach experiences less resistance when it's time to work, just as the chef finds cooking smoother with a well-arranged mise en place. This principle extends beyond physical spaces into our daily routines. The power of ritual lies in its ability to eliminate decision points. When actions become automatic sequences, they bypass the resistance of the deliberative mind. A morning routine practiced consistently eventually feels strange when skipped, not because of discipline, but because the neural pathways have been worn smooth through repetition. The 20-second rule accelerates this process by reducing the initial friction that prevents habit formation. Technology has introduced new dimensions to this challenge. Our devices are essentially habit-forming machines, engineered to capture and hold our attention. But we can turn this to our advantage. By consciously designing our digital environments, from app layouts to notification settings, we can make productive technology use the default and mindless scrolling the exception. Simple changes like turning off autoplay features or using website blockers during work hours leverage those same psychological principles that make technology so engaging, but redirect them toward our benefit. The true power of this approach becomes apparent when examining long-term behavior change. People who successfully maintain transformations, whether in health, productivity, or personal finance, often report that their new habits eventually feel more natural than their old ones. This isn't because they've developed superhuman willpower, but because they've gradually reshaped their environments and routines to make the desired behaviors the easiest option. The initial effort of environmental design pays compounding dividends as time passes. Ultimately, hacking your brain for success isn't about control or restriction, but about creating conditions where your natural tendencies work for rather than against you. When you stop viewing willpower as the solution and start seeing your environment as the invisible hand shaping your daily choices, you unlock a more sustainable path to achievement. The most successful people aren't those with ironclad discipline, but those who've learned to arrange their world so that doing the right thing requires less effort than doing the wrong one. This is the art of making success automatic. Beneath the surface of every habit lies a delicate interplay between neural wiring and environmental design. Our brains operate on an ancient algorithm that constantly seeks to minimize energy expenditure while maximizing reward. A survival mechanism that once served us well, but now often works against our modern goals. The breakthrough realization is that we can reprogram these deep-seated patterns not through brute force, but through intelligent environmental engineering. The magic happens in what behavioral scientists call choice architecture, the invisible framework that shapes every decision we make. Like water finding the path of least resistance through a landscape, our behaviors naturally flow toward the options requiring the least activation energy. This explains why the same person can exhibit remarkable discipline in one environment while struggling in another. The difference lies not in their character, but in how each setting is structured. Consider two workspaces, one cluttered with distractions, where the phone sits within arm's reach, the other meticulously arranged with all necessary tools at hand and potential interruptions out of sight. The occupant may be identical, but their productivity will differ dramatically because each environment sends different subconscious signals. This is why high performers across fields invest disproportionate time in crafting their physical and digital spaces. They understand that peak performance is as much about environmental design as it is about individual capability. The most sophisticated applications of this principle create what might be called behavioral gravity, an invisible pull toward productive action. When your environment is carefully calibrated, starting work feels like rolling downhill, while distractions require climbing uphill. This explains why some people seem to maintain good habits effortlessly, while others struggle constantly. The secret isn't superior morality, it's superior design. Modern research reveals that our environments influence us through subtle sensory cues we rarely notice consciously. The quality of lighting affects our alertness. Spatial arrangements impact our focus. Even room temperature plays a role in decision-making. By becoming architects of these micro-features, we gain unprecedented control over our behavioral outcomes. The person who adjusts their thermostat slightly downward may find themselves more productive simply because cooler temperatures promote alertness. The digital realm amplifies these effects exponentially. Our devices are essentially behavior-shaping machines, with every app interface, notification setting, and default option carefully engineered to capture attention. When we take conscious control of these parameters, turning off non-essential alerts, using focus modes, or implementing app limits, we reclaim our cognitive sovereignty. The difference between feeling controlled by technology and feeling in control often comes down to just a few settings adjustments. What makes this approach so powerful is its scalability. Small environmental tweaks compound over time, creating what mathematicians call positive feedback loops. Each productive action makes the next one slightly easier, while each resistance overcome strengthens future resolve. This explains why people who start with simple changes often find themselves naturally progressing to more ambitious goals. They've created a system where success breeds more success. The ultimate promise of this perspective is liberation from the exhausting cycle of guilt and resolution. When we stop viewing lapses as moral failures and start seeing them as design problems, we approach self-improvement with curiosity rather than judgment. Each relapse becomes data pointing to environmental vulnerabilities that can be addressed. This engineering mindset transforms personal growth from a test of character into a series of solvable puzzles. As we master these principles, we discover that the key to lasting change lies not in fighting our nature, but in aligning our surroundings with it. The most effective hacks aren't tricks or shortcuts, but respectful collaborations with how our minds actually work. When we design environments that make our best choices the easiest ones, we don't just achieve our goals, we become different people in the process. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to implement the 20-second rule is underestimating just how small changes need to be to make a real difference. They'll move their phone slightly further away but still within arm's reach, or put junk food on a higher shelf but still in the same room. The problem is that our brains are incredibly good at finding shortcuts around minor obstacles. If reducing friction for good habits or increasing it for bad ones doesn't hit that critical 20-second threshold, the effect will be negligible. The solution lies in actually timing how long it takes to access a habit. If it's less than 20 seconds, the adjustment isn't significant enough to make a behavioral difference. Another common error is making exceptions for special circumstances. The moment we tell ourselves, just this once, or only when I really need to, we've already undermined the entire system. Our brains are remarkably skilled at rationalizing why this particular situation deserves special treatment. And before we know it, the exception becomes the new rule. This is why consistency in applying the 20-second rule matters more than intensity. It's better to make smaller changes you'll maintain consistently than dramatic overhauls you'll eventually make. Exceptions for the people who see the most success with this approach are those who treat their environmental designs as non-negotiable boundaries rather than flexible guidelines. Many people also fail to account for mental fatigue throughout the day. They set up their environment perfectly for morning willpower, but don't consider how decision fatigue will affect them by afternoon. The 20-second advantage you create when well rested might disappear when tired, if the friction isn't substantial enough. This explains why someone might avoid social media all morning only to binge scroll after lunch. The most effective implementations of this rule account for fluctuating willpower levels by making good habits even easier and bad habits even harder during predictable low-energy periods. Perhaps the most subtle but damaging mistake is neglecting to periodically reassess and adjust the system. What worked initially might become less effective over time as we adapt to our own environmental changes. The 20-second rule isn't a one-time setup, but an ongoing process of refinement. Successful habit hackers regularly audit their environments to identify where friction has crept back in or where new friction could be added. They understand that maintaining behavioral change requires the same ongoing attention as maintaining physical fitness. Small, consistent adjustments compound over time. The final pitfall lies in focusing solely on removing friction without replacing it with better alternatives. Simply making bad habits harder isn't enough. We need to simultaneously make good habits more appealing. This is where pairing the 20-second rule with other behavioral principles becomes powerful. By combining reduced friction with immediate rewards, social accountability, or identity reinforcement, we create systems where positive behaviors don't just happen by default, but feel genuinely satisfying to execute. What separates those who succeed with this approach from those who don't ultimately comes down to treating environmental design as seriously as we treat goal setting. We wouldn't expect to build muscle without adjusting our physical training over time, yet we often expect to change behaviors without similarly adjusting our behavioral environments. The 20-second rule works precisely because it acknowledges this fundamental truth, that lasting change comes not from fighting our nature, but from reshaping the world around us to work with it. When we stop blaming our willpower and start perfecting our environments, we unlock the secret to making success not just possible, but inevitable.